return with this team, or do you think there is a real chance that they could, finish lower down? Which I believe is coming up before the end of October for Rangers, could cause them problems. I mean, looking at it realistically, we've talked about how Aberdeen might be overperforming. We've talked about how other teams might be underperforming. I like the laugh as much as the next person that they're in a fight for third place. But how realistic is that? Is it going to come? Is the norm going to return with this team, or do you think there is a real chance that they could, finish lower down the table than second?
So I want to mark the final rites of the original Rangers Football Club, whose funeral officially was last week. They are formally liquidated and are no more. So I want to come to that. But before, and actually, the reason I mentioned that, teeing it up, segueing beautifully, of course, is that the latter part of what I'm about to say on that, they're kind of being forced to live within their means. That's essentially what's happening. Now, nobody in the Scottish media and none of their own fans will couch it in those terms, but that's exactly what it is. Because of UEFA FSR, mainly, they are being forced to live within their means. So they've had to, because their wage bill was the largest in Scotland, which is ludicrous when you think about the financial advantage that Celtic has, and it's evident to anyone that can read a set of accounts. They've had to suddenly implement an austerity drive, which means that not only have they got rid of a lot of backroom personnel, and therefore perhaps decisions are not being made optimally in that regard, but also the players that they can afford to bring in tend to fall into the sort of distressed goods categories, and that could mean injury profile, attitude, ability, all of the above, right? And therefore every signing is a risk in that sense, and you can then end up with what is then added to the mix is you end up with a manager that appears very intransigent about how he sets his team up, how he wants them to play, a team that has very little pace in it, and who's key, and a team that is chronically short of creativity, and who's really their most important creative outlet is declining badly, which is the much maligned James Tavernier. So what you end up with, in terms of answering your question, is how is this going to go? I think they'll still, like Celtic in 2021, they'll still have their 4-0, 6-0 wins at home. But if you look at they've played 8 games so far, right? 5 out of 8 games have had an XG differential of less than 1. Either way, off those 5 games, and it doesn't matter whether we're on the plus or the minus side of that differential, it doesn't matter, right? They've won 2, they've drawn 1, and they've lost 2. Okay? So if they continue to play the way that they did at Kilmarnock, and I don't think that's a stretch to say that they will, because of the playing risks that I've talked about at length, I think they're going to have an awful lot of games. Not Ross County at home, not Dundee at home, not a lot of teams at home, right? But certainly virtually every away game, apart from maybe the bottom 3 or 4 teams in the league, and a few home games against the likes of Celtic, Algorithm FC, Hearts, Aberdeen, right? There's going to be a number of even home games where they're going to be flirting with this less than 1 XG differential, and they're going to drop. At the moment, they're dropping 50% of points, and that quickly cascades. But what makes it even worse is that you've seen the social reaction, the revolting that's going on because of this loss, and that will every point dropped now will just pile the pressure on the board. The board, which I think is one wee dog, his owner, or whatever. I don't think anyone in the board, and the manager is just going to pile on. So that's. I mean, and James. I know James rightly, and I agree with him. Will take the most optimistic view from their perspective, and that's kind of my risk manager view on life as well, is to always assume the worst from a Celtic perspective, always assume your opposition are going to be at their best. But that's just my honest assessment of where they are. But I did want to, if you'll just indulge me for a little bit, I did want to mark the fact that last week, and again, you wouldn't know were it not for some social media accounts, that the original Rangers Football Club, founded in 1872, crucially incorporated in 1899, finally was laid to rest last week. It went virtually, I think, completely unremarked upon within the Scottish media. And therefore, this is why I want to talk about it, really. I mean, actually, if we go back 12 years, it's taken 12 years to get to this stage. And my God, have those liquidators lined their pockets. I think the creditors, and these are small businesses, these are, at the time, Her Majesty's in, Revenue and Customs, they ended up getting just 14.4 pence in the pound. So the face painter got 14.4 pence in the pound, HMRC got 14.4 pence in the pound. This is an absolute disgrace, an absolute travesty. And to be fair, business reporters, the people on the business desks 12 years ago accurately reported the death of Rangers. It was reported 100% faithfully. But the sports reporters, the Scottish Football Association, and the SPFL, including Celtic, concocted a lie. And basically, the club continued a continuation of history as the same Rangers. Why did they concoct that lie? Well, it's a mixture of all the usual motivations: fear, greed, and partiality. People were whipped up into are led to believe that there'd be civil unrest on the streets, that commercial deals would collapse, that there'd be no TV money coming into the game, that sponsors would all walk away because there was no Rangers. Absolute lies, all of it, and it was all used. So people, some people did act out of a belief that they needed to see a Rangers for commercial reasons. I completely get that. But anyway, what we need to remember is because, again, so many lies are told now, have been for 12 years, and it's a long time. It's half a generation, right? There'll be some young folk listening that might have heard about this, but two things that happened. We need to remember. Rangers generated two major issues. One was a social issue, where they withheld tax and national insurance and cheated Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs out of millions and millions and millions of pounds. Okay, and secondly, from a footballing perspective, so this is an industry perspective, and this is all the clubs that compete with Rangers in partnership. They failed to register player contracts with the SFA, rendering nearly 100 players ineligible for every single game that they appeared in over a 10-year period. Right. Now, the sanction for that anywhere in the world is to default the game. But this is possibly the greatest sporting scandal that's ever been visited upon sport in the United Kingdom. As far as the tax sham was created, what really made that worse was the fact that actually HMRC, there was always a possibility until the court cases started that they'd gone to the table and said, "Yep, you've got us banged to rights." And this is what Arsenal did, and I think a few other clubs in England. Yep, we agree. You've caught us. Let us know what we owe you. We'll pay it, and then we're all good. And we move on. And they would have to have taken maybe as much as a £20 million hit. But what did they do? They lied. They lied. They lied, and they lied. And therefore, when HMRC had to go through the torturous process of all of the courts they had to go through to prove the point, they were never gonna let them off, and they were hung basically in public as an example to the others. Whereas the player registration scam, that was swept away in a criminally misscoped sham of an inquiry. But either way you look at it, the club that was incorporated as a company in 1899 was sent into liquidation in 2012, and that process finalised this year. And listen, incorporation is a prerequisite for operating as a professional football club. A club has to transact. A club has to do business, has to sell tickets, has to issue contracts, has to enter into commercial deals, and so on and so forth. UEFA rules, regulations, legislations are very clear on what a football club is. It has to have that legal personality. The club and the company are one and the same thing. When the football club dies, the company dies, they're dead. And that's it. It's really simple. It's not complicated. They're not unique. They didn't have an original structure. That they didn't have a engine room subsidiary or whatever fucking bollocks the idiots came up with to wash it all away. The irony of it is that people actually forget is there was actually a holding company. There was actually a holding company, because if you remember, Rangers Football Club was part of Murray International Group, and David Murray actually had a holding company called Murray International Sports, and Rangers kind of, for reporting purposes, as far as the Murray International Group was concerned, did actually feed into that Murray International Sports. They never got liquidated. It was the football club that got liquidated. It's funny that, isn't it? So, listen, a lie was necessary to enable Charles Green and his merry band, including, and let's remember this, it's important, Charles Green's group of ne'er-do-wells included somebody who was on Interpol's most wanted list. Yes, that's true, right? Because, it was felt you had to have A Rangers in Scottish football. So that lie was allowed to perpetuate. We wouldn't have sponsorship, we wouldn't have TV deals, clubs would go out of business, and this disgusting threat that there would be disorder on the streets. And do you know what? There was disorder on the streets. When was there disorder on the streets? When they won the 55th title. Yes, there was. Now, this is all called moral hazard, okay? So Scottish football basically went down the road of enforcing moral hazard on all of us, entered into willingly by a Peter Lowell-led Celtic, I should add. And what has happened since? Well, the new club has continued to rack up debts, relied upon director loans. All the while, a cavalcade of colourful characters have rotated through the boardroom. Alistair Johnston is still a key figure at Rangers, the new Rangers. The criminal Dave King was the chairman and is still the majority shareholder. This is what moral hazard looks like, kids. Okay? So this football club, this new football club, has ended up in court with virtually every commercial partner they've had dealings with, right? This is a delinquent football club, and this is what happens when you go down the road of willingly entering into a moral hazard. So this is where we are today, right? But there is light at the end of the tunnel, because what I will say about Peter Lowell, and he willingly allowed this to happen, and certainly didn't do anything to stop it. Maybe he was limited in what he could do, but certainly the SPFL board were of a mind to let this Frankenstein club to meander its way through Scottish football again. But what also Celtic were central to, and in concert with UEFA licensing committee, was in drafting the new UEFA policies around financial fair play and financial sustainability. It's almost as if the new rules were written with certain delinquent football clubs in mind. So specific were the risks that these rules now seek to address. And therefore, it is very difficult now for this new club, which is actually hamstrung by the same structural disadvantages that the old one was. The structural disadvantages in terms of the financial gap to the Celtic that Fergus McCann built, that led David Murray to overspend using very generous mates rates from the banks that was available to nobody else in Scottish football, and then latterly by cheating Her Majesty and the whole of Scottish football. So although the same people are there, and they've obviously learnt nothing because they're continuing to rack up and spend money on players they don't have, biggest wage bill in Scotland. And so, but what I would leave you, and guess what? Yeah, and what was the result of this? Guess who was in the first 17 clubs to be on an FSR watch list, a UEFA watch list? Yes, you can sit our favourite delinquent football club. But as I say, it's not all doom and gloom, because the new reality is that they're not going to die. They're not going to get liquidated. The second club isn't going to get liquidated because UEFA FSR will actually protect them from themselves. But it's actually worse what they're now going to be living in. They're going to be living in a hell, in a purgatory of being a distant second to a financially stronger Celtic. Even algorithm-driven Hearts and well-managed Aberdeen may put second place at risk, right? And, the odd cup, they may well win the odd cup, absolutely. But, for those who don't do walking away, and I think it'll be the apathy that really kills their competitiveness in the end, hell mend them.
Wow. I mean, how do you even follow that, James?
You don't. All that kept going through my mind when Alan was talking, and specifically when he was using the term moral hazard, is that I'm concerned that they might get a bank charter and get swap lines with the Bank of England and the Fed. That would be the one way that they might be able to dig themselves out of this. Because if they were a bank, then they could just be brazenly, oh yeah, Alan, you're an ex-bank guy. I can't get into this.
No. I was a retail banker.